from the university anytime.
Okay, thanks, Jared. Really appreciate it. Okay, let's bring on Doug Austin. Doug, let's see you on stage, please. Doug is the president of eDiscovery today. He's going to discuss for us trends in eDiscovery. So we're going to find out what's going on in the industry from Doug's perspective. And he does a number of surveys. The most recent survey is the eDiscovery Today's 2020 State of the Industry report that he did along with EDRM. Doug, it's always a pleasure to have you back. You're the man. Frankly, everybody, if you're not getting Doug's email every day, his announcements every day, you're missing something. How the man does it, I don't know how, but subscribe to eDiscovery Today. It's just magnificent. Doug, it's all yours.
Thank you, Bill. And this, as you see here, hopefully everybody can see the slides. This is 8 eDiscovery trends and 10 slides, but I'm not going to count this first one. I'm going to move on to start the slides, the trends with the second slide. So let me advance there. So the trends I'm discussing today came from the 2021 State of the Industry report that Bill just mentioned that was issued by eDiscovery Today at the beginning of the year, this January. That report's available for free, and I'll tell you how to get it shortly. And the report included 2 components. It included a 10-question survey issued over 3 weeks, which had 183 respondents, and comments from 20 thought leaders in the industry on the same trends. As you can see here, service and software providers, law firms, and consultancies were the top 3 groups. And we had enough respondents in each of these groups to break out the results for them. Also, the participants were primarily US-centric at 84%. Hopefully in next year's report, we can increase that international participation. And as Bill mentioned, the report wouldn't have been possible without the sponsorship of EDRM. So thanks to EDRM, Mary Mack and Kaylee Wallstead for helping to promote the survey and the report. So here's our first trend, remote-based work from home. And let's face it, I certainly wouldn't want to be a commercial real estate agent right now. Nearly 3/4 of respondents have been working 100% remotely since the pandemic began. And when you add in those who've been working mostly from home, that gets us to 92% of respondents working entirely or mostly from home. So at least for now, not surprisingly, it's a remote world we're all living and working in. The range for groups working fully from home was about 2/3 for providers to about 4 out of 5 for consultants. And I've provided links to a few resources in the slides, including this report regarding law firm jobs, a timely topic after what Jared just spoke about, and I'm sure many of you will want to check that out. And here's a thought leader quote for this topic from David Greenham from RICO. He was one of 17 thought leaders who weighed in here, and he thinks that remote eDiscovery is here to stay, and he also thinks that's a good thing. And I agree with him. I think as legal professionals out there, if you haven't already adjusted your eDiscovery workflows to support remote activities for things like collection and review, you're pretty much mandated to these days. So the next topic is legal tech virtual conferences like this one. And as you can see here, nearly 2/3 of respondents said they attended at least one virtual conference in 2020 and found it useful. That number jumped to more than 3/4 for law firm and consultancy respondents, but dipped to below 50% for service providers and software providers. So why is that? Well, we've certainly seen quality education at these virtual events, including today's event, but the virtual conferences have struggled to replicate the exhibit hall format and networking with clients and prospects that enable the providers to market their offerings. 16 thought leaders weighed in here, and our example thought leader for this topic is Mark Zamsky of Compliance, who expects to see more of a hybrid for conferences post-pandemic. And I should note that we have our first hybrid event currently slated for this August with Ilticon. But I also should mention that this event, pre-pandemic, has always been a hybrid event, so it's ahead of its time in that regard. Our next topic is pandemic effect on litigation workload, and fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your point of view, the pandemic and the associated economic crisis is good for business if you're a litigator. At least it keeps you busy. Nearly half of respondents are already seeing a greater litigation workload since the pandemic began, with another 35% expecting a greater litigation workload to come. So that means 4 out of 5 respondents either has or expects to have more litigation. You see the range there for those already seeing it, from providers at the top end to consultants at the bottom, with law firms in the middle at about the average. Maybe this is why legal industry professionals are more confident in their jobs than just about any other industries. And the thought leader for this topic, out of 13 who weighed in, is Mandy Ross of Prism Litigation Technology, who will be part of the proportionality panel this afternoon. And she's one of the leading industry advocates for a standardized workflow to target and scope discovery, so stay tuned for that. Our next topic is predictive coding, and that's a topic that'll certainly make many heads spin. We have opposite ends of the spectrum here. Nearly a third of respondents use predictive coding technologies and approaches in all or most of their cases, but nearly 1/3 of respondents use it in very few or none of their cases. It's important to keep in mind here that many of the respondents in the survey are eDiscovery savvy, so these numbers may be a bit optimistic when you look at it over the entire legal industry. Providers certainly use predictive coding the most, which isn't surprising since many of them sell the technology or sell the services that go with it. And our thought leader in this topic is Kelly Twigger, out of 18 who weighed in here. You've already seen her on our panel this morning, and you'll see her on our panel this afternoon. She's everywhere. She suggests that the baking in of TAR and predictive coding capabilities into many platforms will hopefully help more attorneys understand it. I think that's true, and I also think that the provider that can best explain the process to legal professionals will be able to move the needle for the most here. Next up is discovery from mobile devices and collaboration apps. And over 20% of respondents here either never has or rarely has mobile device or collaboration data in their cases. And that's almost a third for law firms, while over 1 in 4 always has or usually has it in their cases. When you think about how much we use mobile devices and chat apps today, it's surprising that that latter number isn't much higher. Certainly one consideration with organizations with regard to mobile device discovery begins before cases are even filed with bring your own device policies. And it's very important to have one today. And as you can see there, there's a link for some considerations for creating one. Now, when it comes to thought leaders that weighed in here, 16 weighed in, and Mary Mack of EDRM cites a lack of standards as one of our biggest challenges. And as the CEO of the leading eDiscovery standards organization, hopefully she can help do something about that. Next up is eDiscovery business trends for 2021, and almost a third of respondents identified consolidation of eDiscovery providers through investment or attrition as the biggest expected business-related trend for the year. When you add in those expecting expanded investment in eDiscovery providers, that means about half expect factors that will impact eDiscovery providers. Also, about half expect factors that are related to the pandemic, things such as continued restructuring and reduced budgets. So that didn't leave much that expected non-lawyer ownership of law firms to be the biggest factor, even though Arizona is one state that began allowing that last year. So my thought leader for this topic is Craig Ball, who you just heard from, and he worries about monopolistic pricing trends flowing from consolidation. Well, gee, I hope he's wrong there, but we'll see. So that gets us to our penultimate trend, which was the predicted top trend for 2021. And out of 9 choices, almost a quarter of respondents identified discovery of collaboration app data as the biggest eDiscovery related trend for 2021. For law firms, that was as high as 30%. As you'll recall, they were the group that have collaboration apps in their cases the least. So it's encouraging that they expect to address it more in 2021. Over a fifth of respondents selected increased use of cloud-based eDiscovery solutions, and 18% of respondents identified increased cybersecurity to support a more dispersed workforce for the top 3 choices. And both of those are not surprising considering the number of people working remotely these days. 14 thought leaders weighed in on this topic, including our eDiscovery Santa Claus, Tom O'Connor, who you heard in the last panel discussion. Tom gave us 2 trends. increased use of M365 and in-house discovery, which I think we're certainly already seeing, and eDiscovery in small cases, which I think many of us hope to see more of in 2021. And that takes us to our final trend, which is the eDiscovery challenge not being talked about enough. And needless to say, the first rule of the lack of eDiscovery competence is that we don't talk about the lack of eDiscovery competence. And the second rule is, well, you know, the rest. More than a quarter of respondents identified lack of eDiscovery competence as the eDiscovery challenge that not enough people are talking about. And we certainly saw that issue raise its ugly head in the DR distributors case that the case law panel discussed earlier. Tied for second most selected at 13% each were increased compliance activities resulting from data privacy trends and increased cybersecurity to support a more dispersed workforce. Excuse me. Here's another area that's not being discussed enough, courtesy of Ashley Griggs at Nice Nixidia, audio and video discovery. We were already seeing more audio and video ESI from mobile devices and surveillance cameras prior to the pandemic, and that's shifted up into overdrive now with all the web meetings like this one that are being recorded and that companies are recording because they can. All of that is going to be potentially discoverable ESI someday, so organizations need to consider approaches and leveraging technology to address this growing challenge. So that leads me to the final slide of 10 and the takeaways here. And as I recap them, I do want to mention that these slides represent a tip of the iceberg in terms of information available in the report. And you can get the report free by following eDiscovery Today via email. In addition to this report, you'll also get a link to the 2020 eDiscovery Case Law Year in Review report issued by eDiscovery Today and eDiscovery Assistant, any other industry reports issued by eDiscovery Today, as well as Bill mentioned at the outset, daily posts about eDiscovery, cybersecurity, and data privacy trends, best practices, and case law coverage. So with that, I'll say thanks for listening, and thanks to Bill and the University of Florida for making me an honorary Gator for the day to present at the conference.
Thank you very much, Doug. You're always a welcome honorary Gator, and we appreciate all you do for the industry. And frankly, eDiscovery competency is something that you've been behind for a long time, and that's what we're trying to do at our conference today. So thank you for giving us a sense of what's going on in the industry, what people are talking and not talking about. I thought that was very insightful. And again, congratulations for all you do.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay, next.